Hello, everyone, and welcome to this session. I'm really delighted to be chairing this moment in the conference, which is about investing in us. We're going to share some practical approaches to staff support and belonging and well-being and development. Let's have a look at our next slide. So in this session, I'm going to do some introductions in a moment and a little bit of housekeeping, provide a little bit of context to our session, and then we're going to hear some really innovative stories from colleagues who are joining us in this today. We have time at the end for some questions and answers, and then we will close ahead of the next session so you can all get to see Beverly Harden talking. So I'm Deborah Harding. I am a Professor of Learning and Innovation at City St George's, University of London. I'm a speech and language therapist by background. And I'm really delighted to introduce to you Kirsty Cross. Kirsty is a highly specialist speech and language therapist and senior legacy practitioner at Provide Community. She's here with her colleague, Karen Blackmore, who's also a highly specialist speech and language therapist and senior legacy practitioner in the same organisation, Provide Community. And also Mary Heritage, who I'm sure will be very familiar to many of you, are now a coach, mentor, writer, and freelance speech and language therapist. Next slide, please. So here's our housekeeping. There's a questions tab where you can post questions in the question box, and we will do our best to answer those during and or after the event. There's a chat tab where you can add your comments and feedback and share your own knowledge and experiences. Please do engage actively. There's so much to learn from one another in this space, and there's so much brilliance going on. I absolutely know this from the work I do myself. And often we think it's not as brilliant as it might be, but really, believe me, you're doing brilliant stuff out there. So please share it. All those shiny gems. Be respectful, obviously. All questions and chat is monitored, but I'm sure we don't have to remind you to be kind and respectful. The session's being recorded. All the sessions in the programme are, and that will enable people to be able to catch up, I believe, later. Use the feedback tab. The star rating and comments help speakers, event organisers, and I gather you'll earn points too, so why wouldn't you? And there'll be a secret code shown at the end of this session, so keep tuned in right to the end. Let's move on. So, some context. I'm really passionate about how we support our colleagues in practice, and I was a bit late to the table, but I did my PhD in supervision for allied health professions, and it really tuned me in to how important it is that we have safe, well-supported practitioners, because without safe, well-supported practitioners, we don't have a safe public. I'm also going to share some thoughts in a moment about how important it is that we put the plug in the bath before we fill it. We talk a lot about supply to the professions. We've actually got loads of people we've already invested in. Let's keep investing in them. Let's keep them wanting to come in and be the best practitioners they can be. And then we'll move on to the great innovations that we know are happening. So let's just explore some of those thoughts in a little bit more detail. I love this quote. I share it all over the place. It's from some nursing colleagues, and they say in this paper, really relating to patients takes courage, humility, and compassion. It requires constant renewal by practitioners and recognition, reinforcement and support from colleagues and managers. That's why we need supervision, why we need mentoring, and why we need coaching and other aspects of continuing professional development, because it is by investing in us that we will be able to really do the work we need to do with patients authentically, effectively, safely. And it's important, I think, that we make those links between supporting staff and the key things that keep decision makers awake at night. So what does that mean for productivity? What does that mean for patient safety? What does that mean for length of stay? So we really do need to get better at demonstrating those links. Next slide, please. Colleagues who've heard me speak before know I often talk about the pillars of practice in advanced practice. And I think they're sometimes better displayed in this way, where we think about education and supervision as a real golden thread that runs through our other pillars of practice, our clinical, our research, and leadership, weaving through and strengthening them, helping those strands to pull together for our practice. Next slide, please. And also just wanted to share that we sometimes push everything, or we get a bit over ambitious about everything that we can push underneath the supervision umbrella. And here we've got formative, normative and restorative dimensions that Proctor talks about. Proctor's model is the most shared model for supervision, formative being our knowledge and skills, normative being our standards of practice, and restorative, the how is my practice making me feeling and how am I feeling in practice. But I put round the edge of Proctor's model very often when I'm teaching myself to remind us that there are things that we interface with in those supervision mentoring spaces. So when does formative supervision become more formal education and training? When does the normative standards piece become part of appraisal or fitness to practice or capability processes? And when does that restorative piece become more about staff support, mentoring, coaching, counselling, maybe even things like bullying and harassment? So we mustn't think that supervision is a one-stop shop. We have to think about it in a wider portfolio of professional and staff support. Next slide, please. So back to this plug in the bar thing, we know from our professional registration body that retention is something that needs to be a priority. Their analysis showing that 1 in 10 health and care professionals leaves within 4 years. So we really need to work out how we can invest in those people and keep them. Next slide, please. And this is something that's on our employers and our governance bodies, arm's length bodies, agendas too. So whether we're in Wales or Ireland or Scotland or England, the NHS really is tuned into the need for us to support our colleagues' health and well-being, and they have initiatives specific to that, helping organisations to fulfil their responsibilities as employers under health legislation to ensure that their workforce have the training and support that they need to deliver their jobs safely. Next slide, please. So that provides some context about why all this stuff's so important. And we know there are some great innovations happening out there. And now we're going to hear about a couple of those. So I'm going to hand over with no further delay to Kirsty Cross and Karen Blackmore to talk to us about their work in legacy mentoring. Over to you, Kirsty and Karen.
Thank you. And thank you for asking us to present this morning. I'm Kirsty Cross. I'm a highly specialist speech and language therapist based in Essex. I work for an NHS organisation called Provide Community, and I work clinically with children with significant speech sound disorders.
Thanks, Deborah. Hi, I'm Karen Blackmore, and I'm a speech and language therapist, also working in Provide Chelmsford. I work in the adult acute services at Broomfield Hospital and have a special interest in dysphagia. And as Deborah was saying, since May 2024, Kirsty and I have had 2 new roles to take on as legacy practitioners for our speech and language therapy services.
So this morning, we're going to present some of the positive outcomes of our work. Essentially, legacy practice connects experienced therapists with new staff, and between us, Karen and I have over 60 years experience working in the NHS. Our legacy work offers a planned and responsive programme to support development and well-being, to develop confidence, competence, and to nurture a sense of belonging. Next slide, please.
Legacy practice has been recognised by NHS England as a high impact approach to tackle the challenges of recruitment, retention, and prevent staff burnout. We know that the complexity of our patients and the sheer volume of our clinical caseloads is challenging, especially for our newly qualified staff. Legacy practitioner roles have been successfully established in midwifery and in nursing in our area, but this is the first time that speech and language therapists have been involved.
In 2023, Royal College data showed that vacancy rates in NHS services in England was 26%. And this is huge for our patients and communities. And we've just heard from Deborah, or saw in Deborah's slides, that we know in the 2025 data that 1 in 10 allied health professionals are leaving the HCP register in the first 4 years, highlighting that this transitional stage is a particular vulnerability for newly registered health professionals. So this presents a significant challenge for our AHP workforce, and this is where legacy practice can make a difference. New slide.
So what have we been doing? We've been supporting new and recently qualified therapists, students and apprentices, and our aims have been to bridge the gap between academic and clinical settings. Our work shares best practice, enhances supervision that we already have, and provides clinical and pastoral support. We've offered virtual and face-to-face activities, including welcome videos for new starters before they arrive, so they can meet everybody and know where to go. Band 5 buddies, action learning sets, one-to-one check-ins, and career conversations. We've also established a twice-weekly virtual tea break. And this has enabled colleagues to connect for a few moments, which has been really valuable for those staff working in community settings who are often working alone all day and without other Band 5 peers around them. Our comprehensive programme of CPD has also helped our clinicians complete their NQP goals and their dysphagia competencies at an accelerated rate. New slide, please. Before we go any further, we'd love to share a clip from our colleagues Bethan and Rosie, who were involved in our legacy programme and have now progressed onto Band 6 positions in our area.
I feel really lucky to have had the opportunity to participate in the legacy programme. As my first rotational post was in the community with NELFT, I have felt slightly less connected to my peers who've been at Provide, and so having this programme has given me a really nice opportunity to network with them and meet them quite frequently and share any difficulties and successes that I'm having with them as well. Also, coming from a different university to many of my peers, it's given me a really nice space to meet them, feel much more connected to them and part of the team.
Hello, my name is Rosie and I'm a community speech and language therapist. I have really benefited from the Legacy project and I think particularly working in community it can be quite isolating. When I first started I would go sort of 2 to 3 weeks without seeing a colleague, so having the regular sessions, particularly the in-person sessions, has been amazing. The whole project really has been transformative to my practice because I've been able to learn from the other participants, from the group facilitators and also from the speakers who have come in and just presented a whole different approach to thinking and different methods of therapy that I would never have considered, things like drawing therapy, for example. We've covered so many topics that again, I wouldn't even have thought about, like the HCPC auditing process and personal well-being, which for me always went to the bottom of the pile, but it's been really highlighted how significant and how important that is to maintaining stamina for the long term in this profession.
Next slide, please.
I feel
Since June 2024, our work has reached more than 50 colleagues. So we've supported 14 newly qualified therapists spanning 3 organisations. We've reached 35 pre-registration students and 4 apprentices. Our activities align to the priorities of AHPs deliver to strengthen community, put people first and optimise care by ensuring the right skills are supported in the right place. We've shared our work. We've shared key learning points via all colleague webinars within integrated care systems and national AHP groups and forums. We've used local health bulletins and social media. stakeholders have contributed to ongoing evaluations by Anglia Ruskin University. In the 2 years prior to our legacy roles, around 20 to 30% of NQPs didn't complete 12 months in their first post, whereas since legacy practice has been established, 100% of our new speech and language therapists continue to work clinically in our NHS system, and several of them have now secured a Band 6 promotion. Legacy practice has helped to accelerate clinical competence in critical areas such as dysphagia, so they're now holding caseloads. New slide, please.
Let's hear now from Hilary Armstrong. Hilary was our operational lead for adult speech and language therapy and helped us to prepare the ground for establishing legacy practitioners.
We have been able to keep a consistent level of staffing, reducing the chopping and changing of staffing and vacancies, which is always known to have a negative impact on patient care.
Next slide, please.
We have
effective patient care for the communities we serve relies on a well-led, compassionate speech and language therapy workforce. Staff attrition presents a significant challenge, compromising continuity of care, morale, and sustainable staffing. Legacy practice helps to foster a sense of belonging and supports retention of staff. Establishing legacy practice is a purposeful action to invest in staff development and well-being, to help our new colleagues not just survive, but to thrive.
We've been able to connect experienced, resilient therapists with newly qualified clinicians, students and apprentices. And we know that we've managed to support mental and emotional strength to allow them to adapt to challenges and deliver a professional and high quality patient care.
Next slide, please. This is our last clip and reflection from Hilary.
legacy practice has ultimately improved patient experience by providing confident, competent, professional and caring speech and language therapists.
Before we finish, we'd like to pose a question to everyone in the session. Given that every vacancy and every unfilled role will have a negative impact on our patient care, can we really afford not to invest in us? Thank you. Got one more slide, I think.
I think that's it.
The legacy.
Yeah, that's it.
That's it. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for listening.
Thank you.
Kirsty and Karen, don't go away because you've prompted lots of questions and we've got a few minutes on our side. We can return to some of these perhaps in our panel session as well, but let's pick up a couple now if you're happy to do that. And at the top of the list of questions, if we can go to the next slide while we're answering these, because I think it's a bit of a celebration slide to say, well, great piece of work and so brilliant to hear about it. Hearing about legacy work, or in my role at the NHS, in NHS England across all the professions, but it's really lovely to get all this detail from you. So colleagues are asking, how would you, oops, it's just moved. How would you describe the key differences between legacy practice support and supervision or line management?
I guess there's a running thread about the planned CPD that has been and that's come out in the early evaluations from Anglia Ruskin, where they've looked at our activity data, and there's been a I think it's something like over 40% of our time has been spent delivering in kind of education. So a big element kind of CPD. And when we initially scoped for the role, we looked at the job description, and it was there was something around fostering a sense of belonging, and being kind of connected to something bigger. And that was kind of an important part when we looked at kind of what the job description or what the key deliverables were on this legacy practitioner role. And these job descriptions were taken from successful practice in nursing and midwifery, so that was a key aspect that we wanted to make sure that we were delivering.
Great, thank you. I'm going to keep us on track time-wise, but I'm going to keep an eye on these questions as well, and hopefully we can get back to some more of them within the session. As I say, if we can't, we will pick them up beyond the session and answer them in FAQs. But what I want to do now is to hand over to Mary Heritage, who's going to tell us about her work and her thinking around mentoring in speech and language therapy. So Mary, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Deb. Morning, everyone. I'm Mary. I am a speech and language therapist, and nowadays I'm working flexibly, and I've got particular interest at this end of my career in career transitions. So indulge me for a couple of minutes, if you will. A few years back, I was approached to write an article for Bulletin on mentoring, and the interesting work I did on that led me to write a book on the same subject, which was published last year. I love to find analogies from literature, and there's so many great examples of mentors that you might draw from. You might want to put some of these in the chat, and you might think of Harry Potter, Lord of the Rings, Narnia, and so on. I searched for an example from cinema with a woman mentor, and there weren't many. I found one example, but it's a great one. So the film is The Sound of Music, and like me, it's 60 years old this year. You may remember the scene that Maria, the young nun, has been sent out of the abbey by the mother abbess, Maria's superior, to be a governess in the home of a widower, Captain von Trapp. And Maria returns unexpectedly to the abbey to beg mother abbess to let her stay and make her final vows. Watching that scene again, we can identify the younger, less experienced mentee, Maria, and the more mature mentor, mother abbess. The great examples seen illustrating the structure of a mentoring session between the two. So, for example, it's Maria who initiates the conversation by returning to the abbey. Her mentor initially just uses listening and then some questions, and eventually, but only when asked, she uses guidance and inspiration. She says, "You have to live the life you're born to live." How wise. Mother Abbess then goes on to sing Climb Every Mountain, but that's probably where the scene diverts from my experience of mentoring sessions. So next slide, please, Vicky. I'm going to explain what mentoring is and how it's an impactful, inclusive, and evidence-based intervention that can support us through our long and hopefully successful speech and language therapy careers. Next slide. A mentor is actually an ancient concept, going back to Greek mythology, a trusted someone that we can turn to for guidance. As a mentor, we support the development of another person. I like to think of the mentor as a wise owl. Next slide. The important attributes of mentors are firstly that they have some lived experience. And altruism and an interest in the development of the mentee who they're investing in is vital. We can be both a mentor to someone else, and we can also be on the receiving end of our own mentor, our own wise owl. Next slide. When I was preparing mentoring in speech and language therapy, I identified benefits of mentoring at every single career stage. From the person who first inspired or encouraged us to become a speech and language therapist, through to the legacy roles that we've just been hearing about, which I think are ideal for people who are at the very end of their career. Perhaps something to discuss further. Looking at that list, you might want to just share with colleagues in the chat some of your own experiences of mentoring. For me, I came quite late to the concept in my career tradition, surprisingly. Next slide, Vicky. What evidence there is focuses on the mentoring of pre-registration students. I'm wondering why the lack of evidence is, whether it's low levels of mentoring activity in our profession, or else is it a lack of interest by researchers? It's not clear, but the US profession, led by Asha, has led the way. Next slide. It's my personal belief that within our profession, we have extremely strong professional relationships. It's one of our real strengths. These are often formed when we're at university and later on as well in our work teams, and they provide us with long-term mutual support. Cram and Isabella in this old study found that peer relationships offer an important alternative to conventional mentoring by providing a range of developmental supports for personal and professional growth at each career stage. Whilst they weren't writing specifically about speech and language therapy, it does fit, doesn't it? Next slide. Back in 2008, EB and colleagues undertook a meta-analysis of the available evidence, not necessarily related to our profession, and found that those in mentoring relationships experienced more positive outcomes in terms of career development, higher job satisfaction and salaries, faster career progression, and psychosocial well-being. What's not to love about mentoring? Subjects who had a mentor reported higher levels of self-esteem, self-efficacy, confidence, and resilience. The positive impact of mentoring was consistent across both work and educational contexts. Next slide. So now let's look at the evidence base within our own profession, which focuses on the students and university entrants and their mentoring needs. I'd written my notes for this yesterday saying it's all US based, but actually I really want to signpost everyone to the poster session where there's a really excellent poster reflecting work done by students and staff at Leeds Beckett University, looking at mentoring as part of their equality, diversity and belonging work. So students with mentors are less likely to drop out of university and have lower stress levels. Importantly, students from minority backgrounds benefited, and there were mutual benefits for those who were paired up in a peer mentoring relationship. Next slide. We know well that some speech and language therapists are more at risk of being marginalised, both in their student lives and in their careers. In their study, Girolamo and Gali found that training in mentoring was effective. They state that finding a mentor is reliant on personal connections that people from minoritized backgrounds may not have. So maybe there is a benefit in our profession to provide some help with making introductions and opening up our own networks. A personal reflection on my own early career. When I was choosing my path, applying to universities, struggling through my studies and placements, I didn't have the benefit of a relative, a family friend, or a mentor, not within the speech and language therapy profession, or in fact from any other profession. It was only much later in my career that I formally reached out to some wise owls of my own to ask them to mentor me. I found that when we move into a leadership position, it's common to be recommended to find yourself a mentor. But in the earlier days of our career, when we sadly lose less experienced speech and language therapists, a mentor is less likely to be suggested. Next slide. So in summary, we know that mentoring provides critical, career-long professional opportunities, especially for those who are underrepresented within the profession and who may lack access to professional support networks. Training and introductions can help us find a mentor and make the most of our relationship in order to invest in ourselves, our well-being, and our career development. My final challenge then for us to reflect on is, could mentoring be the missing link between feeling like an outsider and engaging fully in a professional network? Next slide. Thank you for listening. If you want to read more about mentoring, this is the book, and there's a discount code there in the middle at the top for conference delegates, and there's also my website details. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. I'm really delighted to hear about all that. I can't agree with you more. And actually, I've got a question that I'm just scanning my screens here and try not to have screen dyspraxia, but there's one that's jumping out at me about being at a career crossroads, and what you might suggest to somebody where mentoring might be helpful if you're at one of those career crossroads moments just before we move into our full panel?
Yeah, I think that's the ideal time to make sure you've got a mentor, or to find a new mentor, because you can have more than one. I would suggest that you think of role models. Those might be people you know within your own networks, but when we're looking at moving our careers onwards, it can sometimes be good to find somebody outside your own network for reasons of confidentiality and objectivity, somebody who's not invested in you staying where you are. I once went to a national figure expecting her to say no. She gave me an hour of her time and put me in touch with one of the most important and influential wise owls I have. So people can say no, but they can say, I'm going to signpost you to somebody who's more able to offer you what you need at the time. And the other bit of advice I would say is ask. No one has ever been offended by being asked to be a mentor. It's a hugely flattering question to be asked. It will make that person's day, and they may well say yes, or they may point you in the direction of someone else.
That's really good advice. I think particularly that courage to ask someone who you think might just feel a little bit out of reach. And it kind of links with that legacy idea, doesn't it, as well, that those people very often feel they have a lot to offer, and we're not always sure later in our career how to offer it either. So to be asked is, as you say, it's empowering, it's flattering, and it can be mutually beneficial. Let's bring Kirsty and Karen back in so that we can have the final part of this session, having a nice rich conversation. There's certainly a lot of discussion points that are coming up in the chat as well. So let me just swivel my screens around a little bit. There are some specific ones. Let's just pick up a couple of specific ones before we get more general again, around the legacy piece. And there's one here about how much time is, there's a couple here, how much time is allocated to the legacy practice roles, and are they existing, is it existing SLT time, or do you receive additional funding for those roles? So if we can just tackle a couple of those specific ones first, and then we'll broaden the conversation out.
Yeah, we were allocated the time by I was working part-time anyways, and I dropped my actual days. I was seconded into this position, as was Kirsty. So we did have to get a secondment, but that was possible because we were originally funded from the ICB, and they were doing a project into wellbeing and support and preventing burnout in, retaining staff and burnout in staff. So we kind of fitted under that umbrella. It was originally going to be, or it was offered to occupational therapy, but they actually felt they didn't have the resource to take it on. And actually, ironically, we were doing quite well with our retention and our recruitment, and we had a lot of new starters at the time. So that's why we were funded from the ICB, and we got the monies to do that. So actually, it was money from the ICB that then allowed us to have a seconded post.
And it meant, on a practical level, Karen and I currently do 1 day a week each. We're now in this kind of second phase of it. So we've got like our first cohort, and now we're kind of later on. So initially we did 2 days each, and now we're doing 1 day each because we've done lots of the groundwork, we've done lots of the scoping, we've listened and engaged to people who've been through our programme, and sometimes now those band fives who have developed and progressed come back as our kind of specialists to give their legacies of, how do you navigate your NQP competencies and goals on your Royal College platform. So, it's that sharing and passing on experience, which is obviously kind of key and critical for legacy. So we've found that we can be more efficient and just as effective in this second phase. So it has meant that a little bit of our time, I kept my clinical work and Kaz doing some work at the hospital as well, simultaneously. But we were both at the point in our careers where we were part-time. So it kind of worked on that level, but it's not full-time. There are different ways it could be approached. We've learned and looked lots at kind of what's been happening in our integrated care system, which has got kind of legacy nurses and legacy midwives. So we've kind of joined some of the communities of practice that they've had to kind of share and learning from kind of across professions.
Okay. One of the things that's very exciting to hear you say there is this idea that people are seeing their own potential in that space from having participated in it as well. And I think we often struggle about, we're so focused, aren't we, on investing in our clinical pillar of practice. And this is giving people an opportunity to develop across their pillars of practice, actually, by recognizing we heard that in the second, was it Rosie? Who was your second person? I think it was Rosie. I got a real sense of her recognizing the real breadth of development that was possible and the different strands of her professional self that she could develop. That kind of brings me to a question which I think applies both to the mentorship. So I'm going to bring Mary in first and then come back to you, Kirsty and Karen, because it's about people are interested in how do you become one of these people? What sort of training do you need? Do you need to train? We had this kind of conversation, Mary, a moment ago about it's nice to be asked to be a mentor. It kind of implies that all drops out of the sky and we pick it up by osmosis. But how might we develop as a mentor? And then how might we develop in this legacy space? Let's start with Mary.
I think the main ability that I would bring into a mentoring session with someone is to listen. If you have some coaching skills, even if you've only done a one-day coaching course, then that's ideal. Sit and listen, sit and really understand what the person is looking for, listen to what they're saying, listen to what they're not saying, ask some really well-crafted questions, and be really careful about what advice you give, because they will want your advice, but find out what advice it is they're looking for. And that's the big difference between mentoring and coaching. I think you're more likely to provide some suggestions, some introductions maybe, perhaps signposting some resources, some training, a book, a website that they may not have seen, but also making introductions into your network. And traditionally that's what mentors do, is introduce people into a wider and sometimes a more experienced or higher level, if you like, senior network, and widening people's sphere of contacts from the local area or the local clinical specialism or role that they're in into something much wider. The world's a big place, and as our careers go forward, we're more likely to be in touch with a wider universe.
And just to probe a little bit, have you yourself engaged in some specific training around mentorship, or do you have a specific go-to resource that you think that one was really valuable? And the reason I'm also asking that is that there's a question that's in the chat around how might mentoring differ from clinical supervision? So how have you navigated that, recognizing the difference between clinical supervision and being a mentor? And are there any specific signposting that, apart from your marvelous book, that you might signpost people to?
Yeah, that's why I wrote the book, because there wasn't much out there. There are books on coaching, there are books on mentoring, and those are excellent. And some of them are in the references at my last slide. But I hadn't done any training. It is just being a wise owl, being somebody who's got experience, who's really interested in investing in a person with less experience's development. So you care about someone. If you feel like you want to see that you're invested in their development, you'll make a great mentor. I think coaching skills is the only thing that really will help. In terms of clinical supervision, we naturally focus on clinical care. We focus on the interactions with individual service users in our clinical supervision and the immediate needs of the clinician, obviously. Mentoring, I think, takes a step back and looks at where you are and where you might be going. So it's perhaps more applicable to thinking about the whole career. And I think in terms of transitions, as soon as we start thinking about what our next step is going to be, we're already in transition. We're already starting to let go of the place we're in and start to think about where the next place will be. And that transition can take months and often years. So having a mentor that holds your hand through that process, I think can be extremely valuable.
There's something really interesting about the transition space, which I keep picking up in lots of strands of my work, even the transitions we really want to make career-wise. There's that phenomenon that's described in early nursing careers, which is transition shock. But I think I see it in all kinds of places in our career development. You know, when advanced practitioners, they really want to become an advanced practitioner, they're very experienced in their space. That's the next step they want to make. But my word, it's a shock, socio-professional kind of shock to move into that space. And that's when that, and interesting, they're describing it in the consultant-led work as critical companionship, whole raft of work in that space, where I think there are relationships again, which is why I kind of put up that proctor with, you know, it's not just one thing, it's how do all these things mesh together. Let's bring Kirsty. We could go on all morning, but we're not allowed to. We're going to have to finish at some point. So I just want to bring Kirsty and Karen back in about the training question. How do people get those skills to become a legacy practitioner?
So we've experience in the job description, there was, a recognition of experience, but also kind of thinking, I guess, being a reflective practitioner, and looking back. And I know a lot for myself, and I'm sure I know Karen does as well, about kind of navigating the work that we did through the pandemic, and understanding kind of about resilience and measures to maintain your personal sustainability. That came out in Rosie's reflection. She was very early and eager in her career, but has harnessed the idea that she actually needs to really invest in herself as well so she's here in 20 years time, hopefully perhaps being a legacy practitioner herself.
I think some of the concrete things, I wasn't Kirsty's done counselling courses, so that obviously really helped, and I had done some coaching coursing but not fully, so I did feel like I had a bit of an imposter syndrome at the very beginning. I think everyone does when they take on a new role, so obviously the coaching side of things did help, but it's just, I think the fact that you know what your core work is, you know what you need to be able to function, especially if you're working, in the NHS environments with, in acute hospitals, and working with so many different people. And I think it is quite hard for people when they first start, because it is just, firefighting, and everybody is trying to get you to do so many things. So we just kind of tried to separate what was what their clinical days were like, how they feel about it, getting them to reflect on it. And actually part of it as well was sort of standing back from the organisations and looking at all the different systems that they have to go through, because we have a rotation system for our band fives, and looking at just what skills they had in each place, and how we could build on those clinically as well. So we were doing, really very much looking after their wellness side by the one-to-ones and group sessions, etc. Plus we were also dipping in and out of their clinical setting to see how they were coping. And I think obviously that really helps if you've got the signposted time to go in and see what are their actual issues that they're having problems with, and doing it, sort of with them. Which sometimes we don't have that ability when you're in a team and you've got a caseload and you've just got to get through your patients. So we did have the hindsight to be able to step back and then keep dipping in where we needed to.
And then the other thing, prior to starting this, I had an opportunity to do some action learning set training. So it was some specific ring fence for AHPs for East of England, and that was really helpful. Okay. And that's been kind of part of what we've put in our offer. And also really kind of thinking about, I suppose when I kind of look at me and how my career is developing, and looking at my pillars of advanced practice, kind of how facilitation of learning is there, and looking at transferable things, skills. So lots of experience as a practice educator to enhance that. And
how we build, it's not a one-off, it's not a one-stop shop, is it, for any of these things, really?
No.
You know, it's how I often think we have to think about how we build the knowledge and skills, the capability to provide support in this kind of way and in this kind of space, in the same way that we think about building in a very iterative way our clinical knowledge and skills. We don't expect to go to one course and then be able to do all the clinical stuff, and we kind of have to think creatively about the mix and match of different opportunities that help us to develop in these more supporting, developing, mentoring, coaching, supervisory roles. We need to bring the same mindset to it. We've got about 10 minutes left, and I want to ask one quick question of Karen and Kirsty, which I think I've spotted somewhere, but it's also going through my head. You've talked mostly about newly qualified colleagues. Do you see a space, very quickly, do you see a space for this across the career pathway?
Yes. We were initially guided with, because it was part of a study, to collect the research. So, but certainly there can be benefits, and I think kind of in the slides that we show the evidence, it's like in the first 4 years is that vulnerability time. We've not been around long enough, you know, yet to know. At the moment, we can confidently say that we have 100% of our NQP, well, they've progressed. Everyone's still working.
It's a start.
Yeah, it's too early days to know, but it.
But we have, in saying that, we have already run sessions for our band 6s and for our band 7s, and we've done that through the ALS pathway, really. And of course, you're talking to them all the time, because you're wanting to offload some of the stuff that your therapists are having to do in their day with them, to give them more breathing space as well. So we have done sessions with the band 6s and the band 7s. Yes.
People listening in, think about how we might use this, you know, those steps into, and I'm going to come back to Mary because I think this fits with that mentorship piece as well. But, you know, those steps into your first bit of leadership or your first bit of research, you can see how finding the right legacy practitioner with the right skill set and experience, the wise person who can help in each of those places. I'm going to come to Mary, but I'm going to ask you all the same question with literally about 5 or so minutes left. So it's a question often asked when I'm doing research, and it's a great question to ask in clinical settings too. We're coming to an end. Is there a question that you wished I'd asked you and I haven't? Mary first.
I was dying to butt in when you tied up the last answer, which you rightly said about transition shock. And it really made me think I'm working at the moment with people at the far end of their career, the opposite from Kirsty and Karen. And there's a real transition shock about the way we finish our careers, even though it's something we want and we have looked forward to and paid into our pension pot. And I think that's absolutely right. And I think the development of mentors, the development of legacy practitioners fits really well into retaining people at the far end of their career when they have so much to give, and where we're really, you know, the plug is out and we're losing people who have still got something to give. So that's the thing I would have liked to have been asked about. Thank you.
Brilliant, Mary. Thank you for sharing that. Kirsty and Karen, 60 seconds on the question you wish I'd asked you.
We talked a lot about the benefits for people who've kind of been through the programme, but something around maybe asking us to reflect like the mutual benefits, the benefits to me as maybe a fledgling wise owl, and how powerful that has been for the career stage I'm at. I wish I'd had a question that I could have
and I think also
there.
That, you know, for me, it's been a complete life changer, because I was very near to retirement, a bit stale, demotivated. How do you keep going every day? And actually, this kind of let me take myself away and come back with a fresh hat on and realise actually what skills and what experience I do have, and what can I share with people. Yeah. So
thank you. Karen, Kirsty, Mary, thank you for sharing your wisdom with us in this session. It's been really inspirational. I can see it stimulated a lot of discussion and lots of questions in the question section, which we will get to. I want us to move to the last couple of slides because I did promise people that there would be a code or something that will win them points. So I want to move to our thank you slide if we can. Can we do that? Maybe not. We're trying to find the code for you guys. Don't go anywhere just yet. Let's scroll. There we go. So thanks to everyone. And I think is there a code? I thought there was a code for people to click on. Okay, brilliant. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us in this session today, and enjoy the rest of the conference. Keep being brilliant.